So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Revolution, and I want to talk about the controversy surrounding Christian Cage and his failed cash-in. Like, there's a couple people saying that there's some backstage politics where where people felt that Christian was being pushed too hard, and he needed to be nerfed, really, or it was just so he and Adam Copeland could have another feud, or it was just really just for a lot of other reasons. But in my opinion, I just think that they had no plan with Christian becoming the AEW World Champion. So they just wanted to get off of him. And then the other thing, too, is that you never really know if his contract is going to be up soon. So it could be a situation where they're like, okay, you know what? We just want to get this off of you, and we want to send you out the door, really. And then the other problem is that, like I've said before, I think with the AEW contract, the rules should have been, okay, if you can go after the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, or you can go after the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Championship. And what I would have done was have Powerhouse Hobbs versus Chris Jericho. And then what you do is that you have Hobbs win the title, and then he holds it until Death Before Dishonor, and then he faces, maybe like Big Bill or somebody else. And then he gets like hit by Bobby Lashley or beaten up by Bobby Lashley. You have Christian cash in the contract and then become the Ring of Honor champion. And then eventually you can do Hobbs versus Christian Cage in a rematch. And that would be the way to do that, really. That's how I would have done that. Because the problem is that if you have like these contracts like Money in the Bank or Feast or Fired in TNA Wrestling, you always have to make it very significant. Like the first time you have it, somebody needs to win that to show legitimacy. I think the first winner of the Money in the Bank was either Edge or Rob Van Dam. And if I'm correct, if it was Rob Van Dam, you saw him versus John Cena in a legit match where he beat him. It wasn't like, oh, well, John Cena was injured or whatever, really. It was like an ambush. They established that early on. Because if you had something where you have a title or you have like a contract opportunity and the first person loses, it makes it look bad. But in my opinion, I just think that I have to say what I have to say, really, which is I really feel that Christian lost because they didn't have a long-term plan with him being the AEW champion. And they ultimately want to remove that from him. And I think that that's the main reason. I think that, he would have been a bad champion for a couple reasons. He's been losing a lot. He's kind of been like, acting afraid of Hook and everything like that. So it would have kind of created a situation where if he's acting like a chicken shit, or he's having a match with Adam Copeland, they're both wearing like Canadian jerseys and other things like that, there may be a level of Christian where he doesn't really give a fuck about AEW right now. He's just there for a paycheck, so he doesn't care about his portrayal because he's really been like dropping in quality, really. Like the last great match that he had was against Darby Allin, the 2 out of 3 Falls match, the TNT Championship. After he lost that, he's kind of not been really caring about, his depiction, really. So obviously, he's just going with the flow, really. I think that if he said no, I think probably he heard, we'll drop this, sure, whatever, really. So I think he just doesn't care. That's one of the big issues. The second big issue is, like I said, they don't really have a long-term plan with Christian. I think that they really want to stick with that Jon Moxley is going to be the champion all the way to AEW All In, and it's going to be Darby Allin versus Jon Moxley, and that's going to be the thing, really. But, like we've said before, that the Moxley thing is not working. It was a bad main event. It was a bad way to start the year, really. And ultimately, if you're very stubborn about one direction, it's not going to always end well. You look at WWE, what happened with Bryan Danielson, when he was they want Batista to be the world champion, but they changed it because they want to send the people home happy for WrestleMania. They want to sell out WrestleMania. So that's kind of why, you got to make these changes, really. And I think, as I said, I think Swerve should beat Jon Moxley, but I don't think that's going to happen. They're probably going to set up Anarchy in the Arena, where you're going to have Swerve and Hangman and Rated FTR versus the Moxley faction, and then you could throw Ricochet in that, or you can throw MJF in that, or whoever, really, like the fifth person, really, So So yeah, that's probably what they're going to set up, really. So and then again, people are going to be like, oh my god, you're extending this. Now it's going to be until All In, because I don't know if they're going to do a June pay-per-view. I said they should do Blood and Guts as a pay-per-view, but they're probably not going to do that, and that's a dumb decision, really, because they can make a lot of money off of Blood and Guts. But I would also kind of say too that, like I've said before, that that's really their end game. Their end game is really to get to a point where it's Moxley versus Darby, and then again, we're going to also have to wonder, do we really want to see Darby Allin come back? Are we going to really like Darby Allin when he comes back to say, hey, you know what, you went on vacation to Mount Everest, you did this amazing thing, but the whole company suffered because you did this. And then the other thing, too, is that if Darby Allin dies on Mount Everest, there's going to be so much bad publicity, and it's going to look like a company that's like, hey, you know what, you can't control your people. Like, I like traveling too, and I work at a hospital, and I do a lot of great things, and I work 80-hour weeks. But if I said I'm going to climb Mount Everest, or if I said something like, hey, I want to travel to North Korea, because you can travel to North Korea, you have to get like a passport in China or something like that, really. I'm just speaking hypothetically. Sometimes an employer is responsible and say, hey, you're not going to go on this dangerous vacation, because ultimately we need you. And especially if it's like professional wrestling, where you have a boss, they have to be responsible for the well-being of their employee. For example, Darby Allin wants to participate in Jackass, and he says, hey, I want to do this stunt where I'm covered in rocket fuel, or hey, I want to do this stunt where I'm in a bounce house, and we're going to fly that bounce house down a ramp, and it's going to be flying in the air or whatever. There's a chance of him getting hurt, really. AEW is responsible, because they'd be like, okay, Darby, you're not going to do that. You're contractually obligated to be here. So obviously, we're not going to, we need to use you for being the heavyweight champion, or we need to use you for a feud that's going to lead up to you becoming the champion one day. We are not going to have you go risk your life because all the bad publicity if you don't survive a situation, or we're just going to like hold off on we're going to hold off on things, So that's kind of like the big thing about like what I say about Darby Allin. And I know I'm going off tangent. Is are people going to be happy to see him come back, really? Because there's a lot of like they're really shoehorning Darby Allin versus Moxley, and they're not going to swerve away from that, no pun intended, really. And part of that is Christian dropping the title, really, and I think that dropping his contract, so I think that's the main reason. The reason why he dropped it was because they had no long-term plan. They're really so embedded in Moxley versus Darby. Because obviously Darby does climb Mount Everest. It's going to put publicity on AEW, not like this major thing. And then the other thing that I will say is that I really think that Christian doesn't care. His contract could be coming up. He could sign a Legends contract with WWE. He can still wrestle. He can still go with the right feud. He can do a return to TNA wrestling. That could be an option as well, really. But I think that, and as I said, if he doesn't care if his contract's coming up, he'll be like, fuck, I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to just ride through this, really. And if there's no need for him, he'll just like stay at home and just like fuck around, really, while he's collecting a check, really. So I think it's a combination of those things. I think that first of all, Christian doesn't care anymore. The next thing is they don't care about booking Christian strong anymore, and I also just feel they don't really have a long-term. They don't really have a long-term plan with him and utilizing him good now, really. And then the final thing is that it gives you an unpredictable ending, because again, nobody was predicting that Moxley was gonna put a submission hold on Christian Cage, and that's gonna lead to the ending of the match. Really, that's just nobody really predicted that, so it gives you unpredictability, even though it is a bad unpredictability, really. So they definitely fumbled the bag with the main event. They fumbled the bag with Christian. He is a wrestler that gets over because he's very underrated. He's underutilized. We all emphasize with Christian. He could have been a multi-time heavyweight champion. WWE could have used him a lot more, but he's at a point too where he's kind of past his prime, really. It's not that he's a bad wrestler. It's just that WWE is not going to push Dustin Rhodes. They're not going to push Christian Cage because they're going to say, hey, you're in your 50s. It looks bad if Braun Breaker is losing to you, or other things like that, really. So I just think that, like we've kind of seen the best that Christian can do, really. It really stopped with him and Edge having a feud in AEW. And then I also think that another reason why they did this was that you can also do Adam Copeland being mad at Adam Copeland being mad at Christian because he cost him the opportunity, and now you're going to see Adam Copeland versus Christian, part 2 or part 3, really, and we don't want to see that because AEW Revolution was AEW repetitive Revolution. You can't kind of have Christian and Adam Copeland keep feuding with each other. You can't do Tony Storm and Mariah May. You can't be doing Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. They've been doing so many repeats that you need to freshen things up, really. Like Moxley versus Swerve is a good refresh. Like I've said, that if they do something like Ricochet versus Daniel Garcia, that'll be good. Adam Page versus MJF. If you want to do like a hardcore bloody match, and then you set up Anarchy in the Arena with them being on on other teams, on the Death Rider team and one being on the FDR team, Rated FDR team, okay, I'm cool with that. But also I think another thing that I worry about is they can do something where you have Rated FTR, and then you have on the other team with Moxley, you have Christian Cage, and I don't want to see that. I'd rather see Adam Page, Swerve Strickland, FTR, and Adam Copeland, that team of 5 against John Moxley, Claudio, Wheeler Yuta, and Pac, and then also you have MJF as the 5th person. Like that makes a really great team. And then the other part of it is, like I said, I would rather do 6-on-6 where you incorporate the ladies on this. So Will Nightingale and Marina Shafir, that's what they should be doing, So I really think that, like I've said, really, that, it's just what they want to do, really. They just want to nerf Christian. Christian doesn't really care. There's no long-term direction. And the direction that they want to have for Moxley is Moxley versus Darby. Christian is just a floater until his contract is up. Or more than likely, he'll go back to the WWE, get a Legends contract, and that'll be the rest of his life, really. So it's really unfortunate. There's a lot that Christian can do, but the AEW doesn't care about him, and I don't think he cares about AEW anymore.